Class, we're so thankful for Steve Kimes to come in and share with us. A few notes before we get started. There are restrooms through either of down that hall or through that door to the back and around the corner. There are restrooms. There's coffee in the back. And after this class, we're going to be taking an offering for Steve, so there will be a basket in the back as well. Can we open this time in a word of prayer? God, we thank you for this time to come together, to learn, to share, and to find out how better to be Christ-like people to the poor, to the hurting, to the broken. God, open our eyes, open our hearts, open our minds to hear what you have to speak to us today. God, be with Steve as he presents to us and teach us something new today about how to better serve here in North Portland. God, we ask all this in your holy name. Amen. All right, please welcome Steve Kimes.
So can you guys hear me? Yeah. You can hear me, so I don't need this? Probably not. Okay. I've spoken in this room a lot of times. I've never needed a microphone before, so I didn't figure I'd need it tonight. Hi there. So first of all, there is a sheet going around for people to sign up. If you are interested in more information about how to help the homeless locally, put more info next to your name. When I mean locally, I mean St. John's. And so if you want to do that, put more info next to your name and we'll have somebody contact you. And then if after I'm done, you say, oh, I didn't write more info, you can always go back to the sheet and write that on there, or you can go back and say, whoa, this is too much for me, and cross it out, and that's all right too. You know, I mean, whatever is good for you. And so I just want to start. I want to start by talking about a couple who became homeless in Gresham. Tim was on the street for a long time, for a decade, more than a decade anyway, and he was a drug user, and he went into rehab again and again and again, and came out and said, this time I'm not going to go back to drugs, and then he went back to drugs, and he did that all the time. Samantha had 4 kids, and after her 4th child, she went through some severe postpartum depression, and her husband said, well, you're not really helping. He grabbed the kids and left with them, and left her with the apartment to try to pay herself, which she couldn't do. So she ended up having to lose the apartment. And she and Tim ended up meeting at a local soup kitchen there in Gresham, and they fell in love, and they decided that they were going to start a new life together. And Tim really seriously at that point decided he was going to put drugs aside. He couldn't do it for himself, but he could do it for Sam. And they ended up, Sam ended up getting pregnant. They moved into somebody's house for a while, got them there. While they were there, Tim was able to find a job, and now they've moved into St. John's, and they're in an apartment, and they're doing really well, and they have 2 kids of their own, and and they're doing really well. That's the goal. Is to, the thing is that homelessness happens to a lot of people, and you can't expect it ahead of time. You just never know when it's going to be you, or it's going to be your brother, or it's going to be your friend. You just never know who it's going to happen. Who it's going to happen to. So the thing is that we've got to be prepared in any case to be able to help folks who are there, who end up in that kind of a situation. And so what we're doing in this class is we're trying to find out what are some basic steps to help people, how we can take steps to help people who are homeless. So who am I? My name is Steve Kimes. I've been a pastor here in Multnomah County for 22 years, and I've been helping the homeless for about that long. And I've started a lot of different organizations. I was here in St. John's for a few years, and myself and some of my friends who are over here, some of whom are over here, started a ministry among the homeless here in this area. But I also run the Red Barn in Gresham, and do a lot of other things that I never thought I was going to do. Anyway, and so after 22 years, I understand that people say, oh, if you've done something for 22 years, you're kind of an expert on it. So I've been helping the homeless for 22 years, so I get to teach the class. Okay, so this class is about helping the homeless. When I developed this class, this is really just the first one of 4, which is about creating peace among the homeless, or peacemaking among the homeless. And it's really kind of a way to be able to work on doing church ministry in the homeless. But this class is an introduction, so you don't have to take any others to get the information here. Or this is enough. If anybody wants more, I'd be happy to continue that on. Okay, so we're going to cover four basic subjects here. So first of all, we're going to talk about what does it mean to be homeless? What does homelessness actually look like in the broad strokes? Secondly, we're going to talk about homelessness in the community. How do homeless folks connect with the community? Third, we're going to talk about helping the homeless. What are some basic strokes? What are the basic things that we need to think about in helping the homeless? How do we do that? What is it that they really need? And fourth, we're going to talk about some opportunities locally to help folks on the street who are in this area. Okay, so we're going to just start out, and this is going to be the boring part of the lecture, the most boring part of the lecture, so just be prepared. And I noticed that most people have some caffeine. That's good. Okay, be strong. I'll try to keep it short. Okay, so, excuse me. In Multnomah County, we have somewhere between 2,000 and 6,000 homeless people on any given time. The reason that fluctuates so much is because, number one, it depends on who you call a homeless person, but number two is because there's a different number in the summer than there is in the winter. There's fewer people on the street in the winter than there are in the summer. And so if you look at the counts, the Multnomah County counts, those counts always happen at the end of January, the last Wednesday of January, when homeless counts are the lowest. And so those numbers are going to be radically different from the counts that you may get in the summer. So if it says 2,000 people in the winter, it'll be up to 6,000 in the summer. Okay? So there's quite a variety. Somebody give me a guess about how many homeless people do you think there are in the United States in general? Just give me a number.
A million?
A million? What else? What do you think? Anybody else? Nobody else wants to guess. You are a brave woman.
10 million.
What's that? 10 million. Okay. All right.
11.
11. Okay. Just keep going up. That's a good thing. Keep going up. All right. What's that? 25. Okay. So, what's that?
1 in 5.
Okay.
5 people.
One in 5 people. Okay. Over a period of a year in the United States, there are 3.5 million homeless people. That means 1 out of 100 people are homeless every year. Now, the thing is that there's many more people than that who could be counted homeless. A lot of times we think of homeless people as being a certain age, male, usually drunk or on some sort of having some sort of addiction issue, something like that. But that typical picture isn't what we see at all. There's a wide variety of homeless folks, a wide variety of ages. So for instance, there's a lot of young people who are homeless. In Reynolds School District alone, they count 2,000 homeless people in their district. Most of them are high school kids, but not even close to all of them. Some of them are with their family, but some of them are with their friends, or some of them are sleeping on couches. Still, the highest percentage is folks who are men who are middle-aged, 30s and 40s, but that's not even close to all. There's about 1/3 of all homeless people are women, and about 1/3 of all homeless people are under 18. And so there's a wide variety of stuff. There are a number of people who are families who are on the street, a lot of single women with families who would live on the street. So that happens a lot. But one of the most significant issues about homelessness is how long you're on the street. So for the majority of people who get on the street, 70% of the folks who are on the street end up getting off into a home again after 2 months, within 2 months. So a lot of the 3.5 million we talk about are people who are on the street and off the street. Some people who have been on the street maybe just for a couple weeks, and they'll get off the street, and you ask them a year, 2 years later, oh, have you ever been homeless? And they'll say, oh no, I was never homeless. Well, they were homeless. They slept in their car for 2 weeks. They did, but we don't really think of it. We kind of think of that as, oh, well, maybe it was a vacation. Unless, of course, it was in the dead of winter. Then there's no way we would think of that as a vacation. But the longer that you're on the street, then the more the stress hits you, the more the shame hits you, the more the issues of homelessness come on. And then you end up having chronic issues. So a, quote, normal homeless person is a person who is on the street for less than a year. Chronic homeless people are people who are on the street for longer than a year. And if we see someone who, quote, looks homeless, that is going to be a person who is chronically homeless. Or a person who's not homeless at all. Which is why you just don't go, oh, how long were you on the street? On the street, what are you talking about? Well, you look like you're on the street. Well, thank you very much. Anyway. And when you're on the street, there are different levels of being on the street as well. So for instance, if you're living in a car, you're on the street, but it's not too bad. You can move, you've got all of your stuff in the car, you can move in that car, you can sleep in the car, you can turn on the heater. You're still on the street, but it's not as bad as, let's say, sleeping on the concrete somewhere. If you're out, let's say in East County, you're much more likely to be camping in a tent. If you're living downtown, you're more likely to be huddled in a blanket next to a building. And so each of these have their own stresses. Each of these have their own issues. But there's other folks who are homeless who might be in a shelter. They've got issues too, because they've got to be worried about bed bugs, they've got to be worried about their stuff being stolen all the time, things like that. Or someone might be, like I mentioned, young people sleeping on the couch in their friend's house. That happens a lot. We call those couch surfers. And those folks are homeless too. But when we look at the numbers, in the point in time count and how many people are homeless this year, those folks who are sleeping in motels, people who are sleeping in somebody's couch, those folks don't get counted. Those aren't, quote, real homeless folks, at least as far as the federal count goes. And so so once again, there are different levels. The thing is that when we're talking about homelessness and we want to have a general definition of homelessness, this is the one that I work with, is that if you have somebody who their place that they're going to sleep is vulnerable. In other words, they may have to leave within 24 hours or possibly with no notice at all. Then they are homeless. Because homelessness has less to do with the situation. So let's say that there's somebody who might let someone camp in their backyard. I don't know people like that, but there are people that I hear who let people camp in their backyard, sleep in their backyard. And so if someone is, let's say somebody happens to be sleeping in my backyard. Just as an example, I'm not saying I do that. Let's say somebody's sleeping in my backyard, that person is going to be secure because I'm not going to kick him out right away. I'm not saying, well, you know, I might have to kick you out tomorrow, never know. Or I won't go up to them and say, you know what, I'm tired of you, you're out now. I don't do that. So, I mean, I wouldn't do that. And so when somebody is doing that, so the people who might be staying in my backyard, they're not as vulnerable. Whether you count them as homeless or not, but they're not under the same kinds of stress as somebody who is trying to hide over by, let's say, over by Springwater Trail, and they have neighbors coming over threatening them on a regular basis. It's not the same as someone who is in a motel room and they're trying to scramble as much money as they can so they'll be able to be there for one more night. It's not the same as somebody sleeping on their friend's couch and then the dad comes home and says, "What the hell are you doing here? Get out of here and don't come back." That's homelessness. That's what homelessness is. It's that you don't know that you're ever going to be able to stay anywhere. You don't know where you're going to be tomorrow. That's homelessness. And we're just going to do this. Okay, so let me ask you a question then. Now the boring part's over. Let's get involved, be awake. Everybody's awake? Well, we'll be awake. Okay, so, go good. How is it that anybody becomes homeless? There's lots of reasons, lots of different causes of homelessness. What do you think? Why is it that people become homeless? Just give me some ideas. Yes, sir.
Lost a job.
Lost a job. Good. Losing your job. 40% of the people who become homeless become that way because they lost their job. That's number one. Mona.
In my case, for a period of time, I went through foreclosure on my house.
Okay. Got evicted or foreclosure on their house. And eviction is the number 2 cause of homelessness. About 30% of people who are homeless lose their housing because of evictions or foreclosure. Yes, ma'am.
Disability, and you either can't do the same job or you do another job that doesn't pay as much. It all gets affected.
So disability or being unable to have a job that's going to pay enough to be able to get housing.
And that includes mental illnesses.
Mental illness,
and
absolutely, yeah.
All of it.
So
Yeah.
and so let me just say that mental illness is usually counted as one of the number 1 reasons why people become homeless. But about 7% of people who become homeless because of mental illness issues. Yeah.
Drug addiction.
Drug addiction or alcohol addiction. Substance abuse. Okay, yeah. Once again, that's usually counted as number 1 or number 2 of a reason why somebody becomes homeless. And it turns out that about 9% of people become homeless because of addiction issue. And it is definitely one of the causes, but it's not one of the major ones. Mona, yeah.
Rape, both men and women. They feel, vulnerable and not safe and move around. Rape issues.
Rent issues? Okay.
Rape.
Oh, rape. Okay, yes, abuse. Yeah, so abuse. Actually, one of the, probably the number one cause for women, single women, to become homeless is because of abuse. Whether that be because of rape or that be because of physical abuse by a spouse or boyfriend or something else. The spouse or boyfriend abuses the person, and then that person has to run away. And this is although it's mostly women, it also includes men. A lot of men have to run away from abuse, and they just leave, and then they find themselves on the street. This happens a lot, but it is the number one cause for single women to end up on the street. Yes?
Divorce.
Divorce. Thank you. Same type of thing. That is also a major cause of people becoming homeless. These are all really excellent answers. You guys are get top marks because you're actually doing statistically significant reasons for people to become homeless. But what the statistics don't show is that in the end, there's only one reason why anybody becomes homeless.
They don't have enough money. Is that
That's
it?
not it.
That's not it?
That is not it. That is not it. Hey, you probably heard me say it before. Yeah.
Lack of a support network?
Lack of a support network. Not having, okay, let me think about, just think with me for a minute about this. Somebody is mentally ill. Does that mean automatically that they are homeless? Absolutely not. A lot of these folks go into foster care home where they have people in their family who are helping to take care of them, right? They have some sort of a support network to help them. Because of, let's say somebody loses their job, does that automatically mean that they're going to be homeless? No, because a person could end up staying with friends for a little while until they get on their feet, or they could stay with family. And all of the reasons, including addiction. Lots of people stay with family when they're going through addiction issues and have people to help them and try to help them work through those things. The one thing that all homeless people have in common is they have nowhere to go. They have nobody to help them when they are going through a crisis in their life. That is the only cause of addiction. Now, I get a couple people, and I will often tell people who are homeless do not choose to be homeless. And then I always get a homeless person who say, well, no, I chose to be homeless. Oh, is that right? I'll ask. Really? So when you started being homeless, then you just said, hey, this sucks. I'm tired of living in a house. I'll just go and live outside. And they, well, no, I didn't do that. I couldn't find a place, or I looked for a place and I couldn't have. Well, then you didn't choose to be homeless at first. It's a choice that you ended up accepting. And somebody else will say, well, I left my family and I was done. Really? You just left them? Okay, well, I was thrown out of my family. Oh, so you didn't choose to be homeless. That was something that was put on you. Now, there's a lot of people who will end up choosing homelessness as a lifestyle after they've lived it for a while.
Right.
But there is no one. Even the ones who are really hardcore, when I pressed them on it, even they had to admit, no, I didn't choose to live on the street, but once I got there, that it was something that I realized that it was something I could do.
I have kind of a weird question. I don't know this. Is this a true statement or not? That a lot of homeless people choose to remain homeless because they just don't want to work. I've heard that from people,
Okay.
and I never agreed with that because I don't really know, and I
Okay.
don't really have any judgment. What do you think about that statement?
So the question is, the question that I hear you saying is, do some homeless people choose homelessness because they don't want to work?
Right.
And I will say that there is certainly some homeless people who say, well, I don't want to go out and get a job, and I don't want to do that. But those same homeless people are usually the ones who spent the first year being homeless desperately trying to get a job. Again and again and again. They're trying to find a job, and they've had one door after another shut in their face until finally they say, forget it. I don't want to try anymore. I've tried for too long. I'm too stressed. I can't deal with this anymore. Are there some people who just say, I'd rather just live on the street and eat in soup kitchens? Yes. Yes, there are some people like that. Those people are a minority. I will say that the majority of folks on the street, of folks who are chronic homeless, first of all, the 70% who get off the street after a couple months, those people are working hard and they expect to be able to get off like that. They're going to get off. The other 30% who end up becoming chronic homeless, who end up becoming homeless for a year or 10 years or longer, even most of them have just given up on living another kind of life. It isn't a matter of laziness. It's a matter of they've tried and they can't seem to get out of the hole that they're in.
Or maybe
Homeless.
they actually get in a home for a little while and then they lose it again.
There's some-
I can see maybe that.
There's some people like that. We need to move on, but I do want to just say one thing is that there's a cycle to homelessness, that when you become homeless, you have to learn certain cultural patterns in order to be able to survive. Like, for instance, not planning ahead what you're going to do tomorrow. You can't make those plans ahead, and pretty soon you find that you have lost, it's very difficult for you to plan for anything. The thing that you had to choose in order to survive ends up being a pattern that you can't get out of. And so let's say somebody does move you in there, and then they look at you and they say, well, what's wrong with you? And you say, well, this is just, and they don't know how to explain it, but frankly, it's how they learn to live on the street, it's how they learn to survive on the street, but that same pattern doesn't help you when you actually get into a place, whether with somebody else or by themselves. You have to relearn how to live. The other thing that a lot of people don't know is that when you've been on the street for a year or more and then you get into a place, the first thing that hits you is severe depression. You've been living for a year or longer on adrenaline. It's an interesting thing to note that people who live on the street generally get sick less than people who live in houses. And that's because they're living on adrenaline. They got to keep moving. They can't stop. If they stop for one day, they don't eat that day. They don't survive that day. And so they got to keep moving. The adrenaline is pumping, and it's boosting their immune system, and it's boosting their energy, and they're able to pay attention to a lot of things. And then when they get safe into a house, the adrenaline crashes, and they end up going through a severe depression. Because the main thing that homeless people are addicted to is not drugs or alcohol, it's adrenaline. And adrenaline is a drug. It's just a drug that our body produces. And when you come down off of adrenaline, you go through withdrawals and you go through a severe depression. Yes?
So I am in agreement about all of the causes that have been talked about, but I really feel like if we really want to talk about the root cause of homelessness, I feel like it's really the system. I feel like we live in a dysfunctional society, which is becoming increasingly dysfunctional as we become less and less relational and more money and materialistically focused.
So I hear you saying that the main cause, even behind a lack of support network, is the fact that our system, that we live in a dysfunctional system, that we live in a dysfunctional society. And I would agree with you. And I would say that that's actually directly connected to the lack of support network. Back in the day, if somebody was mentally ill, let's say your uncle became mentally ill and he was no longer able to work, then the family would get together and they would decide who crazy Uncle Albert was going to be living with, and let them stay in the house. And yes, he was crazy, and yes, maybe he drank a little much, and yes, maybe he would scream at night, but he's family. We got to take care of him. We don't have that anymore. With that kind of mentality of we have people that we need to take care of no matter what, just doesn't exist anymore. I had one person tell me a neighbor to the Red Barn, used to be a neighbor to the Red Barn. He said, "Oh yeah, my son came up and he was just cussing in the house. He would just cuss all the time. And I told him, okay, that's it. I'm not going to have that anymore. And I kicked him right out of the house. And he may be homeless on the street right now, and I don't care at all." That's the kind of mentality that we have going on now. Okay, let's move on. I want to talk briefly about health issues of people who are on the street, just so that way we get a full picture. Right now, we have a storm front coming in, and we're going to have some very severe rains. Anybody who is sleeping outside, they're in danger of flooding. That's going on right now, this weekend. 2 years ago, we had a lot of people sleeping over by Johnson Creek, and we had some people die because they weren't ready for the floods that came. That's just weather related. Now, most of us recognize that when it's really cold, then it's in danger. And usually it's about this time of year that people start thinking about homelessness again, although I will say that this year the media didn't give us any opportunity to stop thinking about homelessness. But if you have looked at the news or the Oregonian or Facebook, you know that. But this is the time of year that people start thinking about, oh, well, you know, what are those poor homeless folks going to do when it gets freezing, when it's snowing, when we get freezing rain? Well, the thing is that a lot of folks out on the street end up dying of hypothermia. You can die of hypothermia when it's 50 degrees. And in fact, actually, it was last year that a gal wandered, she was mentally ill, she wandered away from her house, ended up in the neighborhoods, and ended up dying on the street on a night that it was 50 degrees. She died of hypothermia. But the other thing that we need to remember is that it isn't just, the cold is not the only issue. Also, when it's very hot, it's actually, if anything, more dangerous for folks on the street when it's very hot. Because if you need to get to a meal, you're going to have to walk miles to get to that meal. If you don't have any water, and most camps don't have enough water, then you may end up with a seizure from dehydration before you ever get to the meal. This is a very serious issue. And you're actually more likely to end up in the hospital because of dehydration if you're homeless than hypothermia or frostbite. So there we go. All right. Another thing is I talked a little bit about stress and how the longer that you are on the street, the more stress happens. There's lots of stress that's going on. And the fact is that the stress is not just during the day, it's at night. It's especially at night. In the middle of the night, the police may come and tell you to move at a moment's notice. Or you may have to or some other person is going to come and steal your stuff, or somebody else is going to, or suddenly, in fact, actually a couple that I know who sleeps out in East County, they had raccoons attack their tent in the middle of the night and rip holes that big, 3 holes in their tent, and they had to pack up and go right away because that was going on. They had to get out of there. There's constant crisis, and when the stress hits you at night, it means you don't get sleep. One of the major health issues of folks on the street is a lack of sleep. Over a period of time, over a long period of time, when you don't get sleep, then you end up having severe mental illness. A person who loses one night of sleep the next day will act like a person who is drunk. The fact is that if you meet somebody who's homeless and they seem kind of woozy or they seem kind of out of it, it may not be drugs or alcohol. It just could be that they didn't get enough sleep. Because for them, lack of sleep doesn't mean one night. It means night after night after night after night of only getting a few hours of sleep. And with all of this, because of the weather, because of the stress, because of the long-term thing, then it changes how long you live. Now, the average person lives to be 79. The average person in the United States lives to be 79. The average lifespan of a black man is 74. There's a clear distinction between someone who is white or Asian and a black man. There's a 5-year difference in lifespan. If you are a homeless person, your average lifespan is 48. 48. If you are a chronic homeless person, then your average lifespan is 48. Last year in Multnomah County, 89 people died on the street. This is an everyday occurrence. Every day. And as a minister to the homeless, I've done way too many funerals and way too few weddings. Because that's the community.